So really, this is kind of at a very high level how I think about the balance between constraints and how that can lead to more or less creativity. So if we start on the high constraint, low creativity part, the lack of freedom aspect, that is probably the easiest one for people to imagine. This goes back to the requirement documents, or it goes back to the highest paid person's opinion, where someone comes in with an idea and said, "Oh, I had a great dream last night, and I kind of worked it out in the shower this morning. Here is what we need to do. Can you go build this?" And at that point, really, a team working on that solution is completely reduced to execution mode. You're kind of not really getting their level of problem solving, their level of creativity beyond how do we deliver this predefined thing. But the low constraints part might be less intuitive for people, where often when you hear people talk about autonomy, they really talk about that's the nirvana. That's what we should really be aiming for. And it doesn't really kind of talk about the risks or the issues with that. So I'd like to do a little thought experiment. Hopefully this works. It's very hard because I can't see what you're doing. So I'm just going to assume that this worked. So if you could just close your eyes for a second and just think of 5 random things. So if you do the same now, but now think of 5 random things that are white. What I hope you'll have found at this point, and we'll see, please let me know afterwards if that's not true. It should be a bit easier to do the second part because we've introduced a constraint. So there's suddenly a thing, you've got a mental model of like things that are white in your head. So you might have gone a piece of paper, a wall, some milk, whatever. And it's easier to come up with that than not have any focus and have to come up with 5 random things. And if you found the 5 random things a bit easy, that may have even been because you introduced some constraints yourself. So you may have thought of 5 things that are in your room. So like a chair and a table and a desk and a laptop. And so even there, you've introduced a constraint yourself to give you more focus to make the task easier. And so what I think is that there's really an optimal balance between these two, where rather than say, think of 5 things that are white and you can see in your room right now and you've bought in the last week, which is like very limited and there's lack of freedom and it might be harder to come up with that. Or think of 5 random things. There's this balance between focus and freedom that is kind of the thing that we strive for. Now, what's really important here, I think, in a product company context, is that the context of what you're working on here is very important. So in some cases, a lack of freedom might be quite right. If there is a specific migration that needs to happen, or you're trying to remedy a security vulnerability, or that there are cases where the idea of making that kind of commitment and simply delivering a predefined thing is the right thing to do. But hopefully, if you're in a situation where you have empowered product teams, that is the exception and not the rule. And usually what we're really trying to find is this balance where there is focus, but there's freedom in terms of having the creativity and the creative freedom to solve for those challenges. So this is another way to visualize that. So if we talk about alignment has to do with constraints. So getting very, very clear together on what are the constraints and what are we trying to do to solve this problem. And then autonomy. If we look at the bottom left, it's kind of clear. There is no autonomy, so teams can't decide what they work on, but there's also no alignment, so it's not clear what they're meant to be working on. And it's probably not a whole lot of stuff gets done in that environment. If we look at the top left, where there is high alignment but low autonomy, this again goes back to this predefined solution idea where we've already decided we want to cross the river and we want to do that by building a bridge. And so all we need to do is get a team to build a bridge. And so they might be a bit creative with what that bridge looks like, but the creativity is still kind of hemmed in a lot. Then if we look at the bottom right, which really is the case where you have the highest level of autonomy, where teams are not getting any direction, they can pick what they work on, but there is actually some constraints somewhere, because someone's thinking, oh, I hope someone's working on the river problem. So there is actually something that we hope will be achieved here, but we kind of hope's not a strategy. And that's kind of what's happening here. Like, oh, I just hope that people will realize that's the right thing that we want to do. And then the top right is the example really of where we want to get to, which is giving a team a reasonably clear objective, ideally with some context around it, but maybe explain to them why we want to get to the other side of the river, what's there when we get there, and then really allow them to figure out the best way how. Maybe it's a bridge, but maybe it's a ferry, or maybe it's a boat, or maybe we just teach everyone how to swim. Maybe that's the fastest way that we can get there. So actually, if you look at this, there is more autonomy in the bottom right, but there's more focused creativity and more impact in the top right.